So back in September event, Apple launched iPhone 14 series, but the one that caught everyone's attention was this guy right here. It features upgraded cameras, a new always-on display, and some cool funky animations around the new notch design. And I have been using it for about 2 weeks or so as my daily driver. So in this video, I'll share all my thoughts regarding 14 Pro Max. So let us begin with the very first thing about this device, that is its design. The iPhone 14 Pro Max looks huge even when a similarly sized smartphone is placed alongside it. But since I have pretty big hands, the smartphone feels pretty good to me. But since the 14 Pro Max fits my hand perfectly, I won't mind using a device with 6.7-inch display. The craftsmanship feels excellent and the hardware feels very solid. And the device is even IP68 certified, which means it is dust and waterproof. And the battery is permanently installed. The front and back are protected by durable glass, and the frame is made of highly polished stainless steel. Even though the device has a pretty solid build, but my iPhone is very precious to me. And if you're somebody like me who wants to protect their iPhone no matter what, then make sure to check out cases from iBlast. Protective Armor Box series to Aries Mag clear case, they are holding your back. So head to the link in description and check out these cases. Now coming back to the topic, Apple launched the iPhone X with a notch, which was later shortened down in iPhone 13 series. But on the iPhone 14 Pro models, Apple has replaced it with dual punch hole cutout, which they named Dynamic Island. You can think of it as an animated software extension that encloses the cutout and uses it to show information. Even though it was expected that 14 Pro Max will offer a Type-C USB port, but we still got the golden lightning port. Let's just hope 15 Ultra has it. Apple, are you listening? Well, coming back to the topic, if I were to talk about yet another interesting thing about this device, then I would say it is definitely display. And talking about display, I am in love with it. Instead of notch hanging from the top of the OLED screen, you now get Dynamic Island that live up to its name and hype. There are a number of things that are not immediately obvious when you look at its dark space, but if you would take it out in sunlight, you will definitely be able to see what all components are exactly placed inside this Dynamic Island. While the iPhone 14 Pro Max display can go purposely dim, it also has the ability to shine quite brilliantly. The 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR is still gorgeous and can offer typical brightness of up to 1000 nits, but it can get to 1600 nits for HDR, and outdoors will push the nits to a sunlight beating 2000 nits. Talking about the software, this thing comes with the iOS 16 pre-installed, which has implemented the Dynamic Island and always-on display feature for the first time. I think it is a great solution to hide camera cutout while showcasing the information of the app that is running in foreground in a very optical way. And at its launch, I was genuinely questioning myself, is this feature going to have a practical usage? And to those who say this doesn't have a practical usage, just wait for third-party developers to create apps around this thing. And yeah, I think it is going to bloom soon. But to summarize always on display, I believe it is quite useful and is very well implemented. Even though the battery life is slightly affected whenever you have turned on this feature, but even after that, you still get a very decent battery life. If I were to talk about communication, this thing is 5G. I mean, of course. And one very cool thing about communications that this device has is emergency SOS via satellite. But since it isn't available here in India, so we won't be able to try it out, we won't be able to test it out. So yeah, I'm not sure if I should make a comment on that. Features such as VoLTE and Wi-Fi calls are also supported, and even the normal voice quality is pretty good. Now let's get to a very important part of this review. Camera. So back in 2015, Apple launched iPhone 6s with a 12 megapixel camera. And in 14 Pro models, Apple has finally upgraded to 48 megapixel sensor. So the device has a 48 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 12 megapixel 3x telephoto camera, and a 12 megapixel front facing true depth camera that now supports autofocus. And even though the Pro models have the new 48 megapixel sensor, but still the photos will be shot in 12 megapixel format. So whenever you click a picture, your iPhone will combine 4 pixels into one to offer a picture that offers more clarity, better HDR, and better skin tones. While shooting in the new 2x mode in the camera, the 14 Pro Max shoots with only 12 megapixel in the center of its main 48 megapixel sensor. Even though it is a digital crop, but still the clarity and overall colors are pretty good. To actually shoot in 48 megapixel format, you'll have to use Apple's very own ProRAW format. And compared to last year's 13 Pro Max, the quality of pictures from 14 Pro Max are a clear step up. Photos from this device clearly have more details and you get a bit more natural background blur. The entire 14 Pro series also introduced a new feature called Photonic Engine. And Apple claims that this feature has improved the quality of low light pictures. And which is why in my testing, I clearly found and noticed that the low light performance of 14 Pro Max was much better than 13 Pro Max. Talking about the videos, a new feature that clearly caught my attention was action mode. So when turned on, it offers a bunch of stabilization to the video, eliminating the requirement of a gimbal if you don't want shaky footage. But one downside of shooting action mode videos is that it requires a lot of light. So you'll only be able to use it in broad daylight. That too in 2.8K format. Talking about performance, this thing is great. No matter whatever application or task you throw at it, it will handle it smoothly. All thanks to the A16 Bionic chip, it can handle almost anything from opening day-to-day apps to browsing social media, from exporting photos or videos in editing software to shooting long-duration 4K videos. It can manage almost anything. They were definitely not lying when they said that A16 Bionic chip is world's fastest mobile processor till date. Now, talking about battery life. The 14 Pro Max comes with slightly bigger battery than iPhone 14 Pro. And in my testing, I found that iPhone 14 Pro Max lasted about 1 hour more than iPhone 14 Pro. And since Apple hasn't disclosed the battery stats, so it would be really hard for me to compare with last year's 13 Pro. But if you would turn off AOD, you would get screen time that is about 1 hour lesser than iPhone 13 Pro Max. So now the question comes, should you buy it? And I'll try to answer this in single word. Maybe. Hold on, I'll try to elaborate it. So if you're using iPhone 13 Pro Max or even I would say iPhone 12 Pro Max, I think you can skip on this upgrade. Sure, things have quite drastically improved, but I think that they are still a great device to have. But if you're thinking of switching to an iPhone from an older generation iPhone or maybe from Android, then I believe it is a device that you should definitely consider. So do let me know in the comments down below what are your thoughts about iPhone 14 Pro Max. If you like what you watched, then make sure to hit the like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay updated with everything Apple. If you'd like to know more about everything Apple, then make sure to download the iGeeks blog app from the App Store. This is me, Yash, signing off, and I'll see you in the next one.